Welcome to the Wicked Podcast, where we read the business books you don't have the time for. I'm Marcus Kirsch.
And I'm Troy Norcross.
And we are your co-hosts for the Wicked Podcast.
Marcus, I'm all packed up. I'm coming back to London. Please tell me that it's warm and like 22 in London and lots of sunshine, right?
It's warm and it's 22 and it's lots of sunshine.
That's really great. I can't wait to get
Don't
there.
pack any jackets. Just
No
take two
coats.
T-shirts and just come
two
here.
T-shirts. Okay, great. Well, since I'm almost done packing, maybe we should kind of talk about who's on the show today.
Yes, so today we have Juana-Catalina Rodriguez and her book, Unsettled Disruption. So it's about innovation and disruption and helping companies progress in that direction.
Great. What were your takeaways today?
So my the interesting takeaway for me was, we work a lot in those projects actually that look at improving and doing things new and so on, and sometimes even call it innovation. And the thing I found often is that, because we're working a lot for medium to large scale businesses rather than small startups most of the time, is that in the more established companies, you can easily go and you have a budget between 3, 5, 15, whatever upwards million, and often these companies have never built a company from scratch themselves because they're already big, they don't have to. But then when you want to change and innovate, often that's sort of the characteristics and principles you have to apply, like building a brand new business. And a brand new business doesn't make money from the get-go, It starts small and then it grows. But there's a lot of expectation with these big organizations to, I'm spending 5 million and I want to have a return of investment of 15 million in 6 months' time. Which obviously doesn't really make any sense, but the ambition is always there. Because sometimes you can with established products and established things and established customers. But when you do new things, you don't have established customers, you don't have established products, and so on. So I was asking her, when you go into a bigger project like with that size of budget, and the obvious way to get there is to start small, experiment, try, and build up incrementally, which will take time. And because it's smaller, you start with less customers. So the revenue that will come back is small, and often at the beginning looks very laughable in comparison to what the rest of the company does. So it doesn't get taken very seriously, or they don't even want to do it. So how do you justify taking small little steps? Or how do you convince the business that taking small little steps and taking time is the right thing to do? Because business often don't have a lot of patience. And she had a couple of really good answers on that one. How you align that better with business expectations, and therefore you stay within the expectations of the business despite the fact that you're actually growing small. And I found that really, really helpful, because I think it's one of these big gaps in a lot of transformation projects that's often missed and often not filled. Mm-hmm. What about your insights?
I liked when we were talking about how we should address this whole fear of failure thing that you and I talk about quite a lot when it comes to new innovation or new innovation projects. How do you address that? And we were also talking about the fact that, during the pandemic, there was so much fear of bigger failure, like the whole business failing, that people were not afraid of failing on trying new things, whether it was remote home working or whatever else it was. It was like suddenly there was a bigger fear and a bigger incentive, and they're trying to find ways to carry that forward and keep it going. And the other point she was saying, look, you've got to make sure the business is aligned with actually wanting to do innovation, not just innovation for the word's sake, which means it needs to be staffed appropriately and it needs to be aligned with the corporate objectives. So I think that she answered that question pretty well. She's written a really great book, and it was a great conversation with her. But why don't we go and listen to Juana?
Let's go to the interview. Before the interview, a quick word from our very first sponsor, Zencastr. We use Zencastr for all our audio and video recording, and it's a very nifty tool that splits up all the channels for very easy editing. Zencastr is used by 10% of all active podcasts. You can get 40% off the first 3 months and unlimited audio and video recordings with our special coupon code
Wicked Podcast. I repeat, Wicked Podcast for 40% off. And now, the interview.
Hello, everyone. Today we're here with Juana-Catalina Rodriguez. Hello, Juana, and welcome to the show.
Hello, nice to see you both.
And so you're dialing in from the beautiful south of France. And as usual, our first question starts at the top and is please tell our listeners who you are and why you wrote your book.
Okay, so I am Juana-Catalina Rodriguez. I am from Colombia and I have been living abroad for the last 22 years. I am what we call a serial entrepreneur and entrepreneur. So I have been working for several companies and corporations in different sectors. So I was quite fortunate to experience consumer goods, financial services, retail, digital identity, technology, cloud, and most recently, I have been working with social entrepreneurship and social innovation. Now I funded two companies. So I funded organization BITER is an organization that is trying to help people to reduce plastic waste and plastic usage. So we are just starting, but was one of my dreams in the last 10 years while working in corporates. And I also funded GNC Nova. Actually, was a business that came out of the pandemic when I was trying to help companies, startups and small organizations dealing with the disruption that caused the pandemic. So this is the reason why wrote the book. I found out that people in this situation was really stressed with the change and wanted to find ideas in 5 seconds how we need to change everything, we need to reorganize ourselves. I was using this framework, combining different methods that the people know, and I was helping them to structure their ideas, to come with the solutions, and to try to see the situation like an opportunity, not just struggling with the situation. So it was quite interesting because I was writing a book about entrepreneurship, all the struggles and the process of innovation in big companies. And I ended up writing a book about how to handle the challenges and how to structure and framework disruptive innovation.
So, disruptive innovation, it's an interesting phrase. I mean, you could look at it as a different kind of innovation, or you can look at it as disruption for the source of innovation. But I think whether it's a big company that's been doing this 10 years ago, or whether it's a small company doing it in response to COVID, isn't it always a bit about disruption driving the need for innovation?
Yeah, this is a really good point because I have one of the first friends that read my book. His comment was, "Wow, I understand, Juana." So what I was trying to do is to demystify disruptive innovation because most of the people believe that they need to change everything in few weeks. Even if during the pandemic a lot of organizations have to change everything even in a few hours, but what I am trying to show to people is that it's a process. It's a process that can be driven by different steps and framework. They don't need to discover anything. Another friend told me, but actually, this company is doing disruptive innovation, but you don't need to have breakout technology or breakout ideas. You just need to connect the dots and putting it together. Because I remember in the company I was working before, we spent years trying to do remote work and trying working for home was like, oh my God, this is really complex. We can implement it. And you have all these different things, the bureaucracy, the organization, the technology, the security guys of IT that need to change things. And then with the pandemic in 3 weeks, they have to put everyone at home, and they had to put this in place. So it was this process that helped them because they have the solution already, but the pandemic was the trigger that pushed them to put it in place. So what I try to explain in the book is all these different factors, how you could connect the dots and put together and demystify. what is disruptive innovation.
Lovely. I'm currently working on a bigger project in the banking industry, and it's the same kind of characteristics that you just described, which is, everyone wants to change everything yesterday, um, and you start looking at what's being affected, and again, the answer is, yeah, pretty much everything, because the investment hasn't been done in the right way. They haven't been, kept their systems clean. So suddenly there's often then very high pressure on doing everything. And because it's also everything and it has to happen fast, often it's really hard to tell which step is the valuable step, right? Because there's 1,000 steps to do. And there's always push to do as much as possible. And there's a whole people dynamic around that. But the question is, on a list of 1,000 things, where maybe 10 things will produce the real value going forward and other things are just sort of cleanup. How do you identify where to start without getting lost?
Okay, that's so I went to Singapore in, I think it was 2010. My company were struggling to develop the mobile payment for a big bank organization in Singapore. So they asked me to go there and look what is happening. So we have several meetings with the people on the board, the innovation team, and then I asked them to explain me how was the onboarding process and how we were developing the mobile payment platform, because at that time it was quite new to have people paying with the phone and doing contactless. So, and I asked them to bring me to a place when the people were using it. I say, no, but people is not using it. They need to go to the bank office to subscribe. They need to sign papers, so they need to wait 3 days to activate the solution, and then maybe when they get a certification they need to go back to the office to activate the service and to share the money. I say, okay, so the problem is that sometimes we are really comfortable with the no, with what we know already and what we are doing. And in most of the cases, especially in industries that are risk adverse and that have a lot of constraints with the regulation, the organization, they want to implement the same process they were doing on the on their financial services offices to the mobile retail. And the people who want to pay or who want to do mobile payment, they want this thing to work in a few seconds. They don't want to the store. They want to identify themselves with biometrics. So I think that for me, one of the key points when I always start a process when I'm working on innovation, in this case, disruptive innovation, first is to start with the environment. What is happening in the environment, which technologies are available, with regulations, with trends, all the changes that is happening today, climate change, environment, demographics. Then I am looking at the consumer, because the consumer is always a great starting point. A couple of discussions with the customer, a couple of visits to the places when they were trying to promote mobile payment help a lot to open the eyes. And this is not just for the people in the team who is working in innovation, it's also for the people who is managing innovation. Bring them on board and bring them to speak with a couple of customers, and you see how they will change. And the third point is to see what others are doing. So I remember a long time ago when my boss told me, but why you are doing the same thing other people are doing, just benchmark. So benchmark is about bringing ideas from other sector, from industry to industry. If you have these three elements, maybe you don't have a bright idea, but you start to think about what can be next and how you can create get it right. But the important thing is not just that you wake up with a great idea. It's about seeing what is happening outside, what is happening inside your organization, and trying to put this together to bring these breakthrough innovations.
Yeah, and I have a very natural follow up to that, because I'm literally just walking through the same thing. Where we're building up this program. It started with a small idea that quickly became very big and complex, and so now we're exactly at that point. So we're having some benchmarking research being done, and we're looking at different areas. But when I look at the things that originally came back as well, so what you see easily is like, obviously when you're looking out with the benchmark, you look at what your competitors are doing.
Yeah.
Sometimes it seems organizations are not realizing that what they're looking at is 2-3 years old, right? So they're looking at like, oh, my competitor's doing this. They're already doing this. It's what we are not doing. But that's something the competitor built 2 years ago because it's already live. Otherwise, I wouldn't be seeing it. So if we then start doing that, we are actually at least 2 years behind, if not 4 years behind, because in 2 years' time, the competitor will have built something else yet again that we haven't built yet. And what I am struggling with is getting clients into the conversation to say, hey, by the way, when are you going to leapfrog? When are you going to, do you just want to chase? You want to stay behind? Or do you actually want to catch up? But if you want to catch up, you have to start thinking not about looking at what your competitors are doing, but what they're doing in the next potentially 2 to 5 years or something like that, right? How do you start? Is that something you include in your model? And how would you possibly start looking at it that way? Because for a lot of companies, this often is very uncomfortable because it's like, oh, that's too far away in the future, you know? All we do is just copy the best competitor and then
Yeah.
we're happy again. What's your view on that?
Actually, there are two notions that I found quite interesting. Is I bring up the notion of jobs to be done in my book, and
Yeah.
some people say me, Juana, but we know jobs to be done. Everyone knows.
Yeah.
And I also brought the five forces for Porter, because I think it's not about creating something new, it's about putting together the things. So there are a couple of examples. When you bring the notion of jobs to be done, what is interesting about is not the theory or the buzz about that, is the notion that you don't have to see competition of the people who are selling TVs. So if you are producing TVs, your competition is not the people who are selling the TVs. The competition is all the things that people can do instead of watching TV. So how they are spending their time. So if you see, it's a really interesting example of Netflix. They see sleeping as a competition, as a competitor, because the people go to sleep, so they are not watching Netflix. So if you put together the notion of jobs to be done, is going beyond the fact that you are answering a customer need or answering a problem, is the notion of what is the job you are going to do for your customer. So if you are selling TV, you are not getting the people just device that is high tech and with a lot of buttons and 3D and whatever. What you are getting is something when the family is together spending time to enjoy this time in front of the TV. So I am working with some people now from the FIFA, and we have different people from different organizations in football. Football is a area when they was really affected by the pandemic because the fans didn't have the time, can't go to the stadiums because of the pandemic. And also we have this new generation, JC, that they don't want to spend 2 hours watching, they want 15 seconds in TikTok. So the problem is that we are trying to question is what is your job to be done, how the people are, how we are going to reveal the experience in the stadium, how we are going to reveal the experience between the fans and the football team to create that. So as you say, it's not just about watching what the competitors are doing in the next 2-3 years. It's all about watching what is the context around your consumer and around the competitors. So the second point I bring in my framework is the five forces for Michael Porter. Why? Because I am working an organization. We want to reduce plastic waste. And when you see the industry of plastic and you start to reframe the point of this packaging and all these things that are happening, you need to start looking around all the substitutes that will come to that. We have paper, we have glass, we have. So if you put together the consumer that want to change, the climate change, the environmental circumstances, the legislation, plus the other industry that are emerging and the technology, because the technology will also enable new business model. Like you actually say, okay, this industry is gonna change radically in the next 5 years. So how we are going to change and how we are going to adapt to this.
And I like the beginning of that particular explanation because I talk a lot about what I call VX, which is value exchange.
Yeah.
And so you're not actually delivering a television, but you're delivering the value of family time together and getting people to start think about what is the value and then what are you going to offer them in exchange for that value, or what are they going to offer you in exchange for that value. And the classic example I talk about is Facebook. And they say Facebook sells data. I'm like, no, Facebook doesn't. Facebook sells to consumers connectivity with friends and family. And they pay for that connectivity with their attention. And Facebook sells the attention to the advertiser who then can reach that particular consumer. But understanding that two-sided value exchange, people don't always take the time to dig into and to look into that. So I really like that particular thing. You talk a bit about in the book about kind of the whole business model and the value proposition and the value chain. So what are your views about bringing value chain thinking into innovation?
Yeah, I think there are one thing is having great ideas because all of us have great ideas. No, I should do this. I should change that. I should create a new machine who doesn't consume zero gas and fly from. So the idea is that when you have your idea and you start to work on your project, you need to put together the neighbors, and the neighbors are value chain, consumer experience, business model, and technology. So there is no, some people, when I start to speak with some of my customers, we want digitalization, we want disruption, and disruption is also about digital transformation. No, you need to see what is your business model, what is the value you create for your customer, what is the value you capture, and how you are going to build the different enablers. And the different enablers is the value chain, their, let's say, the value proposition, the value capture model, the channels, all the things, because I didn't have one project in my lab that works by themselves. I need, okay, when you have your idea and you have your prototype, you need to look into your go to market, your price proposition, your difference in neighbor, how you are gonna sell it, how you are putting it together. And then when you have already your value proposition, which technology are the best enabler for your solution? It, if you see the first prototype of Supples, Airbnb on different, they were, even Facebook, technically there wasn't a breakout trends, and there are things you can do with whatever technology. It was about how you put together this in one single value proposition that combines all these elements that you are mentioning, and how much value you are creating, no? Because some startups, they are creating huge value, but they are capturing almost zero value. So
Mm.
there is when you have problems and you are not being profitable and you need to start and you have all the consequence of this. So this is the key of this business model.
If I look at because my background a little bit more than Troy's in particular is in design thinking and service design, and obviously there the focus is really really heavily on the customer and the customer experience. Even so, I would argue, and interesting enough, in design thinking, you have DVF, which is desirability, viability, feasibility, which is actually a nice, balance between three aspects of the
Yeah.
customer, the business, and can you do this for the right price? And the thing is then, how do you get the business to actually even, how do you usually get the business to recognize the customer value? And what I found is often as a second part of that question, what is the most common metrics you find that translates well enough to the business to say, oh, actually, yeah, we recognize this too? Because often it's like, oh, sorry, if it doesn't hit the bottom line, it doesn't. It's like, well, what I found often is, yeah, actually, there are these things outside that customer are really valuing, and that will drive your bottom line. But the translation is often not made. So the business looks at it and goes, yeah, that's not what we measure. We measure something else. Like, and then I often have to say, well, but it's the same thing. It's just that thing from a customer perspective, and it's the thing you like from a business perspective. So how do you translate customer value into the value that the business understands? Because a lot of businesses don't seem to understand it, often because of language, not because of they don't get it, but it doesn't translate to what they measure. What's your view on tackling that?
Okay, so I mentioned in my book the example of Starbucks and the customer experience because I think it's a fabulous way they create value and they really recognize the value of customer retention, customer loyalty, and all these things, or what we call it, KPIs that can bring. So, and this is true. Yesterday I went to Toulouse because I don't have Starbucks in my small village. We are 2,000 people, so we have a really coffee shop. And sometimes I come down to work in the morning. I always order a cafe latte and a carrot cake. So that's my typical one. And the guy say, okay, it's $3, but €3. I say, no, you are wrong. You didn't charge me the coffee. No, you are a loyal customer, and today the coffee is on us. So this is the key measure of course, he bought me, I will go back every week and I will go to that Starbucks. So there are different ways to measure customer value and customer engagement. So it depends a lot of industry. I was discussing like with I also coach and mentor of executive at Stanford, and he works in the B2B. And he said, Juana, but okay, this is clear that if you go to retail, you have customer rotation, footstep, how many people come to the store. I measure loyalty. But if you are in the B2B model, how you are going to measure? So I say, okay, in that case, you need to measure customer lifetime value because you time who have big customers. I was working with telecom operators, with financial institutions that not always as rentable and a good customer as you think. So my answer to your question is depends a lot of the industry and the way you measure your business. So if you are working in retail, if you are working in consumer goods, if you are working in B2B, you need to find what is the key strategic measure that are going to get the value of your customer. I am working in India with a company who do book publishing. And the first thing I did when we started the project with the CEO is, okay, let's please bring me 5 authors and we discuss with them. And we have meeting with them, we discuss about their value. And at the end of the meeting, he said, well, I know. The first thing I need to ask to the author is why you are publishing a book and how you are going to be successful. So he changed totally the metrics of being the cheapest one, being the most cost effective, that the value of this customer was to make their dreams happen and how he's going to translate that to the value to the company. So for me, your question is key, but it's principally what is the business you are doing, what is the job you are fulfilling, and how you are going to measure that value in the short and long term.
That is a really, really good answer, and I like the good examples. I did a bit of work in India myself, so it's always interesting to see the cultural differences. That whether it's India or whether it's in France or whether it's in America, when you're with a client and they have that aha moment, and then you see them fundamentally change their business, that's really rewarding. At least it is for me. I I want to kind of give us a spin to the other side of that, though. I think a lot of businesses say they want innovation, but they want to do it in the most incrementally small way with the lowest possible risk. Because there's always this fear of failing. And I think with the pandemic, a whole lot of really, really good ideas that would never have ever been tried because they would be considered too risky were suddenly pulled out of the drawer and implemented. But how do you do that in today and going forward to reduce this fear of failure and get more adoption of really, really good ideas that people are afraid to do?
That's a great question because when I started Unsettled Disruption journey, I was writing a book about entrepreneurship. And actually, it will be my coming book when I was speaking about all these struggles when you are an entrepreneur and struggle, frustrations, and wins. So I think that there are two things but there are several factors that to answer that question. There are two things that I found today. The first one is what we call the half hitter effort. I don't know if I pronounce it well, but okay. So it's the fact that yes, we are going to do innovation. We are going to start. Let's organize a workshop. We call the marketing manager because in a small organization normally it's the marketing manager and the marketing offers to do that. Okay, now to all the things you have to do, you are going to do innovation and let's organize our workshop for next week. So this poor guy or woman, he say, okay, that's great. Innovation is really nice. It's really exciting thing. Doing a design thinking workshop is cool, but it's not the strategic focus in the company. Strategy is about resources allocation. And if you are just putting that as a to-do list in someone who is already and is 100% involved in this effort, it's going to be always a half-hitter effort. So this is the first point. So it's not just innovation for the innovation. If you do want to do a workshop because you want team engagement, collaboration, that's great. And normally the design thinking workshop will do perfect for that. But if you want to do innovation, you need to allocate resources and you need to allocate time who can dedicate to this process. The second point is about being risk adverse. And what I say to the people is you can think big, but you can start small. And this is for both for the management to get buy-in for your idea, so you cannot come to the board and tell I'm going to sell 100 millions, I'm going to start and I need 2 million euros to start this project. You need to start step by step and having quick wins on the process as a trailblazer and innovator, because the far you go on the process, the more engagement, the more investment, and the more things. So there are no deals when you are going to change one day to another one. And there are all, the list is quite long to answer that question, but there are the two that I think are important to handle right now.
Lovely. So, as always, we have more questions than we have time. So here's our last question. You just mentioned to start small, and I remember when we talked to Alvin Turner over a year ago, and a lot of other innovation. We all know it has to start small. How do you balance then the business expectation and the bigger business you talk about? The more likely they want to see a return of investment in like 3 months when things are hardly built, right? Because bigger companies rarely have built the companies themselves. It's full of people who sit there for decades and just worked on things. So they don't know how to grow things. They don't know how to grow things from scratch, new things, innovation, which is okay. It's not judgment here. It's just the way it is, right? So, and the big companies, they want a big budget. So they have bigger investment, let's say 5 million, straight away. And then you go, well, okay, how am I going to get this back? And then you come back and say, well, here's a small step I'm taking. This is how we have to do it. We can't go big quickly. It has to grow because we have to de-risk and do the right thing. How do you balance this then, these expectations of the investment versus the return of investment, essentially, with those small steps?
Yeah, this is a great question because in my previous job, we were trying to find the answer to this question why we are doing a lot of innovation, but it's really difficult to scale. So normally we have organization. I am talking about big corporation. You have organization when you do incubation or corporate innovation or whatever you want to call it, and you have team working on this project. And when they go to MVP, minimum valuable product, they ask these projects to go to the big business units. And in that case, the business unit absorb the project, and in most of the cases, it be transformed in something weird that doesn't nothing to do with the original idea, or doesn't scale and the project just fail. So when we were doing, I was working in big projects with telecom operators and banks. When we were doing in that case is to define milestones of wins. So what is a win? For example, having a pilot with a customer in X city. Normally, when you are working in big organization, and I did before, you have customer in different regions, so you can find a customer in Singapore. I just giving an example, a customer in US, and establish a way to find this milestone without investing a lot, but investing quite a lot of more money that a startup entrepreneur can do it. You can define milestones to have this win. What happened in the pilot with feedback we are doing. And normally, when you are developing this process, you are also testing your product and adapting. My last project was about trusted digital identity. And digital identity is really complex subject, and it's different in Africa, in Asia, and in US. So what we did is we take three pilot customers, Brazil, Africa, and US, and we started to work with a small customer to define the product, to fine tune. And this process took 2 years, but it was perfect because we found all the difficulties. And not until we tested the product and we validated within 2 years, we started to scale and to define the priorities. So it's keeping your stakeholders dreaming, being sure you are investing money because actually you have the resources and that's great in the company, but define key milestones to get to the point that you can scale. And in the way you are also testing one of the problems you have also in big corporation, and we start to invest in a project, and even if it's not working, we keep investing because we have been working during 5 years on that. So these key milestones enable to evaluate and restart from scratch if you need it. And the last one that is really important, be sure your project is strategically aligned with the vision of the corporate. Because if you want to sell carrots in a company who is doing digital identity, that is not one award, even if it's really innovative and really different. So be sure to validate, because there is a strategic alignment. There's going to be support, investment, probably success.
Juana, that was a really, really great answer. And thank you so much. Like Marcus said, we've always got more questions than we have time. So we're going to have to wrap it up for today. But thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
You've been listening to The Wicked Podcast with co-host Marcus Kirsch and me, Troy Norcross.
Please subscribe on Podomatic, iTunes, or Spotify. You can find all relevant links in the show notes. Please tell us your thoughts in the comment section and let us know about any books for future episodes.
You can also get in touch with us directly on Twitter on @WickedandBeyond or @Troy_Norcross. Also, learn more about the Wicked Company book and the Wicked Company project at wickedcompany.com.